My son stopped me at the hospital door after I'd driven 15 hours straight and said the words that would cost them everything. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Brooke said she doesn't want you around." 4 days later, when the hospital called asking how I'd like to pay the $8,500 delivery bill, I smiled for the first time since my grandson was born. I'm Caleb Anderson, 68 years old, and after 42 years managing construction projects worth millions, I thought I knew how to spot trouble. Boy, was I wrong about my daughter-in-law. Let me back up and explain how we got to this moment where everything would unravel. In my construction days, I'd seen plenty of contractors try to pull fast ones on project budgets. Inflated invoices, phantom expenses, creative accounting, you name it. I'd developed a sixth sense for financial fraud that had saved my companies hundreds of thousands over the years. But family was supposed to be different. 3 weeks earlier, my daughter-in-law Brooke had called me practically glowing through the phone. "Dad, Caleb, the baby's due any day now, and we'd love for you to be here when he arrives. You're going to be such an amazing grandfather." I should have known something was off when she started calling me Dad Caleb instead of just Caleb. After 5 years of marriage to my son Mason, she'd never been that warm. Usually our conversations were polite but distant. She'd hand the phone to Mason within minutes of answering. But this call was different. She talked about how excited she was for me to meet my grandson, how much it would mean to have family there for the big moment. The excitement of becoming a grandfather for the first time clouded my judgment. At 68, I'd been dreaming of this moment since Mason announced the pregnancy 8 months ago. I'd already started thinking about teaching my grandson about tools, maybe getting him interested in building things with his hands. The Anderson men had always been good with their hands. I live in Phoenix. They live in Denver. That's 1,017 miles of desert highways and mountain passes, about 15 hours if you drive straight through. I'd made the trip twice before, once when Mason got married, once when they bought their house. Both times Brooke had been cordial but never particularly welcoming. This invitation felt different, warmer somehow. I packed my best clothes, bought gifts for the baby, a little tool set that was really just toys, and a savings bond for his college fund. I even splurged on a week at a decent hotel near the hospital instead of my usual budget motel. This was going to be the most important week of my life, and I wanted to do it right. The drive itself was brutal. At 68, sitting in a car for 15 hours isn't what it used to be. My back ached from sitting so long, my knees got stiff, and I had to stop more often than I'd like to admit. But every mile brought me closer to meeting my grandson, and that kept me going. I'd stopped only for gas and coffee, calling Mason twice to check if there was any news. Both times, Brooke answered his phone, sweet as pie, telling me to drive safely and that they couldn't wait to see me. Her voice was so different from usual, excited, almost breathless with anticipation. It made me push harder, ignore the fatigue, keep my foot on the gas. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking garage at 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning, exhausted but excited, I felt like I'd conquered the world. The fluorescent lights were harsh after 15 hours of highway darkness, but I didn't care. I was here. I was going to meet my grandson. The maternity ward was quiet at that hour, just a few nurses moving around with soft footsteps. The receptionist, a kind older woman who reminded me of my late wife, told me Brooke was in labor, room 314. Her smile was warm when she said, "First grandchild?" When I nodded, she added, "How wonderful. Nothing like it in the world." I practically walked on air down that hallway, my heart pounding with anticipation. After all these years, all the waiting, I was finally going to be a grandfather. The Anderson family name would continue another generation. That's when I found Mason pacing outside the delivery room, looking more stressed than excited. He was wearing scrubs they'd given him, but instead of the proud father-to-be I expected, he looked like a man facing execution. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Not relief, not joy, something closer to panic. His eyes went wide, and he actually took a step back. "Dad, what are you doing here?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. After 15 hours of driving, after the invitation, after all the sweet phone calls from Brooke, my own son was asking me what I was doing at my grandson's birth. "What do you mean?" "Brooke invited me. She called and said you wanted me here for the birth." Mason's eyes darted toward the delivery room door, then back to me. He looked like a man caught between two impossible choices, like he was trying to solve a problem with no good solutions. She changed her mind about having family here. She wants it to be just us. I stared at my son, trying to process what he was saying. In my 42 years of construction management, I'd learned to read people pretty well. Contractors who were about to skip town with advance payments had a certain look. Subcontractors who'd cut corners on safety had another. Mason had the look of a man who knew he was delivering bad news but didn't have a choice in the matter. But I drove 15 hours, Mason. I'm here now. I'm not asking to be in the delivery room, just to be nearby when my grandson arrives. Mason ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from when he was a kid and had broken something. I know, Dad, but Brooke's really adamant about this. You know how emotional she gets. And the doctor said stress could complicate the delivery. Something in his voice told me this wasn't Brooke's sudden change of heart. This felt planned, orchestrated. But I was too tired and too shocked to fight in a hospital corridor at 2 a.m. How long has she been in labor? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. About 6 hours now. The contractions started around 8 tonight. That meant Brooke had been in labor for 6 hours while I was driving through Colorado, getting closer by the mile. She'd known she was in labor when she answered my last phone call at 10 p.m., telling me everything was fine and they were excited to see me. Did she know she was in labor when I called earlier? Mason's face flushed. Dad, I really think you should just go to your hotel and wait for my call. He wasn't answering the question, which was an answer in itself. In construction, when a contractor won't give you a straight answer about timelines, you know they're hiding something. Fine, I said quietly. I'll go to my hotel and wait for your call. Mason looked relieved, which only confirmed my suspicion that I was being deliberately pushed out. Thanks, Dad. I'll call you as soon as the baby's born. I promise. The walk back to my truck felt like the longest walk of my life. The parking garage was cold and empty, and my footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. I'd driven 1,017 miles to be told I wasn't welcome at my own grandson's birth. At the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my driving clothes, staring at my phone. The room was one of those generic hotel rooms that could have been anywhere in America. Beige walls, brown carpet, a painting of mountains that looked nothing like the real ones I'd driven through to get here. I spent the next 8 hours in that room, checking my phone every 10 minutes. I'd doze off for a few minutes, then wake up and grab my phone, hoping I'd missed Mason's call. But the screens stayed dark. The call finally came at 10:17 a.m. Wednesday morning. Mason's voice was exhausted but happy, the way new fathers are supposed to sound. Dad, he's here. Hunter Mason Anderson, 7 pounds 2 ounces. He's perfect. Congratulations, son. How's Brooke? Tired but good. The delivery was tougher than we expected, but everything went fine. There was something in his voice, a distance that hadn't been there before, like he was reading from a script. When can I meet him? Another pause. This was becoming a pattern. Brooke's really tired, Dad. The delivery was rough. Maybe give us a day or two to settle in. I felt like I was begging for scraps from my own family. Mason, I'm his grandfather. I drove 15 hours to be here. I know, and we appreciate that, but Brooke needs to recover. The nurses said new mothers need rest and quiet. Too many visitors can be overwhelming. You understand, right? No, I didn't understand. When Mason was born 32 years ago, both sets of grandparents were at the hospital within hours. My father had paced the waiting room just like expectant grandfathers were supposed to do. My mother had held Mason before he was 6 hours old, but I said, of course. Family first. Thanks, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow with an update. I spent 2 more days in that hotel room ordering room service and watching terrible daytime television. Game shows where people got excited about winning toasters. Talk shows where people aired their family problems for entertainment. News programs that made me grateful for my relatively simple life. Except my life wasn't feeling very simple anymore. Friday morning came and went with no call. By noon, I'd had enough of waiting for permission to see my own grandson. I drove to the hospital myself, determined to at least see Hunter through the nursery window. The same receptionist was at the maternity ward desk. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Oh, you're back. How's that beautiful grandson of yours?" "I haven't met him yet," I said quietly. Her expression changed. Oh, well, they're probably just getting settled at home. First-time parents can be a little nervous about visitors. That's when I discovered they'd already been discharged. Thursday morning, apparently. Mason had taken my grandson home without even telling me. I called him immediately from the hospital parking lot, my hands shaking as I dialed. You took the baby home without even telling me? Dad, Brooke wanted to get home to her own space. She's been really anxious about germs and visitors. The hospital can be overwhelming for a new mother. I'm not a visitor, Mason. I'm your father. I'm Hunter's grandfather. I know that. Look, maybe in a few weeks when things settle down and Brooke feels more comfortable. A few weeks. I'd driven 15 hours to see my grandson in a few weeks. Mason, I'm going home. Dad, don't be like that. This isn't personal. But it felt personal. It felt like the most personal thing in the world. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I hung up, packed my bags, and started the long drive back to Phoenix. If they wanted to exclude me from Hunter's birth, fine. But they were about to learn that actions have consequences. And I was about to learn that my daughter-in-law was far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. The drive home to Phoenix was the loneliest 15 hours of my life. The same highways that had filled me with excitement on the way to Denver now felt like an endless stretch of disappointment. Every mile marker reminded me that I was driving away from my grandson instead of toward him. I stopped at the same gas stations, saw the same mountain views, but everything looked different. The excitement was gone, replaced by a hollow feeling in my chest that I couldn't shake. I'd been a grandfather for 3 days, and I'd never even seen my grandson's face. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Phoenix, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. The Arizona heat hit me like a wall after the cool Colorado mountain air. My house felt empty and quiet in a way it never had before. I spent the weekend trying to get back into my normal routine, watering my garden, reading the paper, watching baseball on TV, but everything felt wrong. I kept checking my phone for updates from Mason, photos of Hunter, anything that would make me feel like part of my grandson's life. Nothing came. Sunday afternoon, my phone finally rang, but it wasn't Mason. The caller ID showed Denver General Hospital. Is this Caleb Anderson? Yes, ma'am. We have some paperwork issues regarding the birth of Hunter Mason Anderson. The insurance claim was denied, and we need to discuss payment arrangements for the delivery bill. My heart started pounding, but not with anxiety, with something much more satisfying. After 42 years in construction, I'd learned that when someone calls about money unexpectedly, there's usually a story behind it. I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I'm not responsible for that bill. Our records show you as the financial guarantor for Brooke Anderson's delivery. And that's when I realized exactly what my dear daughter-in-law had done while I was driving across 2 states to be there for my grandson's birth. Ma'am, according to our records, you signed financial responsibility forms for Mrs. Brooke Anderson's delivery. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, my mind racing. After 42 years managing construction budgets, dealing with contractor fraud, and reviewing financial documents, I knew exactly what this meant. But I needed to hear the details. When exactly was this form signed? Let me check. It shows here that the forms were submitted electronically on November 15th at 11:47 p.m., November 15th. The night I was driving through the middle of nowhere, Utah, probably around the time I stopped for gas near Salt Lake City. I'd been on the road for 8 hours, exhausted and focused on getting to Denver safely. My phone had been losing signal in the mountains, and I'd been worried about missing Mason's call if labor progressed quickly. And how exactly were these forms submitted? Electronically through our patient portal. The signature appears to be yours, Mr. Anderson. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. While I was white-knuckling it through a snowstorm on I-70, desperate to reach Denver before my grandson was born, Brooke was forging my signature on financial documents. I need to see these forms. Can you email them to me? Certainly. What email address should I use? 20 minutes later, I was staring at documents on my computer screen that made my blood boil. Not only had Brooke forged my signature, but she'd also somehow obtained my social security number, address, and financial information. The forms clearly stated that as the paternal grandfather, I was requesting to be financially responsible for the delivery as a gift to the new parents. But the most infuriating part was the timing. These forms were submitted at 11:47 p.m. while Brooke was sweet-talking me on the phone about being there for the birth, knowing full well that she planned to stick me with the bill while excluding me from actually seeing my grandson. I pulled up my phone records. At 11:52 p.m. on November 15th, I'd received a text from Brooke. "Drive safely. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Hunter is going to love his grandpa. 5 minutes." She'd sent me that loving text message 5 minutes after committing identity theft against me. In construction, I'd seen contractors pull elaborate schemes to inflate costs or hide shoddy work. But this was different. This was family. This was the woman I'd welcomed into our family 5 years ago, who I'd helped move into their first apartment, who I'd co-signed a car loan for when they were getting started. I called the hospital back. "This is Caleb Anderson. I just reviewed the financial responsibility forms and I need to report fraud." "Fraud, sir?" "First, I never signed these documents. Second, these were submitted without my knowledge or consent while I was driving to Denver at my daughter-in-law's invitation. Third, I have GPS evidence and hotel receipts proving where I was when these forms were supposedly signed." The billing representative's tone changed immediately. "Sir, if you're alleging fraud, I need to transfer you to our legal department." "Perfect." While I waited on hold, I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Screenshots of Brooke's texts inviting me to Denver, call logs showing when she contacted me, photos I'd taken during my drive. I always documented long trips for insurance purposes, a habit from my construction days. The timestamps on these photos would prove exactly where I was when the forms were submitted. "Mr. Anderson, this is our legal department. I understand you're disputing financial responsibility forms. I'm not disputing them. I'm reporting identity theft and fraud. I have evidence that these documents were forged." For the next hour, I provided the legal department with every detail of Brooke's deception. They were particularly interested in the fact that Brooke had invited me to Denver while simultaneously committing fraud in my name. "Mr. Anderson, this is indeed a serious matter. We'll be filing a police report and turning this over to our fraud investigation team. In the meantime, all charges to your name are suspended pending investigation." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. Brooke had played this perfectly. She'd gotten me out of the way during the birth, had her private family moment, and planned to stick me with an $8,500 bill as a final insult. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 42 years dealing with financial fraud in the construction industry. I knew exactly how these investigations worked, and Brooke had just committed several felonies. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Dad, hope you made it home safely. Brooke's doing great and Hunter is such a good baby. We'll send pictures soon." Pictures. After excluding me from his birth and forging financial documents in my name, they thought pictures would smooth things over. I typed back, "Glad everyone's healthy. Looking forward to meeting him soon. What I didn't mention was that I'd just spent the afternoon ensuring that Brooke's fraud would be thoroughly investigated by both the hospital and local law enforcement. Sometimes the best response isn't immediate revenge. It's letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Tuesday morning brought another call from Denver General. "Mr. Anderson, this is Detective Parker with the Denver Police Department. We've been assigned to investigate the fraud case you reported. We need to ask you some questions." "Of course." For the next 45 minutes, I provided Detective Parker with a detailed account of everything that had happened. Brooke's invitation, the 15-hour drive, being turned away at the hospital, the subsequent exclusion from seeing my grandson, and finally discovering the fraudulent financial responsibility forms. "Mr. Anderson, do you have any documentation supporting your version of events? I have text messages, call logs, photos from my drive with GPS timestamps, and hotel receipts proving I was traveling when the forms were allegedly signed by me. We'll need copies of all of that. This is shaping up to be a clear case of identity theft and fraud. The fact that the perpetrator invited you to travel while committing crimes in your name suggests premeditation." Premeditation. Brooke hadn't just made a desperate decision in the moment. She'd planned this entire scenario. "Detective, what happens next?" "We'll be obtaining warrants for financial records, hospital surveillance footage, and digital evidence from the submission of these fraudulent forms. If our investigation confirms what you've told me, your daughter-in-law will be facing several felony charges." That afternoon, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a woman in her 30s holding a manila envelope. "Caleb Anderson?" "Yes. I'm Paige Miller, investigator with Denver General Hospital's Fraud Prevention Department. I have some documents for you to review." She handed me the envelope and waited while I opened it. Inside were printed copies of security footage from the night the fraudulent forms were submitted. The screenshots showed Brooke at a computer in the hospital's family lounge, typing on their patient portal system. "Mr. Anderson, these images were captured at 11:52 p.m. on November 15th, approximately 5 minutes after the financial responsibility forms were submitted under your name." There was Brooke, clear as day, hunched over a laptop in the hospital's waiting area. The timestamp showed I was still 4 hours away from Denver, somewhere in the Utah mountains with no cell service. "What happens now?" I asked. "The evidence is overwhelming. Hospital fraud is a federal offense when it involves identity theft across state lines. Your daughter-in-law is looking at significant jail time and financial penalties." My phone rang that evening. Mason's name appeared on the screen and his voice was shaking with anger. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" "Hello to you too, Mason. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Don't play games with me. The police showed up at our house this morning with a warrant. Brooke's been arrested for fraud. They said you pressed charges." I settled back in my chair. "I didn't press charges, Mason. I simply reported identity theft when the hospital called asking how I wanted to pay Brooke's delivery bill." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "What delivery bill?" "The $8,500 bill for Hunter's birth that your wife stuck me with while you two were playing happy family without me." "That's impossible. Our insurance covered everything." "Your insurance was denied, son. That's why the hospital called me." Apparently, Brooke made me financially responsible for her delivery while I was driving through Utah to see my grandson, who I was then not allowed to meet. What we discovered next shocked everyone, including the FBI. Agent Riley Foster called me a week later. "Mr. Anderson, I need to prepare you for what we've discovered during our investigation into Brooke Anderson's activities." "How bad is it?" "Over the past 24 months, the woman you know as Brooke Anderson has committed identity theft and fraud against no fewer than 5 family members across 4 states. The total amount stolen exceeds $38,000. My stomach dropped. 5 people? Agent Foster explained that Brooke wasn't even her real name. She was actually Jennifer Webb, a career criminal with an extensive history of family infiltration fraud. She'd been working with her actual husband, Logan Webb, to target wealthy families by having Jennifer marry into them and systematically defraud all family members. "Mr. Anderson, your case involving the hospital bill was actually what broke this open for us. When we started investigating, we found a pattern going back years. The trial of Jennifer Webb was a revelation that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage. It turned out Jennifer and Logan Webb had been researching our family for over 2 years before she even moved to Colorado. They'd identified Mason as an ideal target and me as what they called a high-value secondary target. But the worst part came during Agent Foster's testimony. During the trial, we learned that Jennifer had planned to fake her own death and Hunter's death in a car accident, then disappear with Logan and my grandson. This would have allowed them to collect life insurance payments while using Hunter for future extortion schemes against our family. Detective Parker testified that if I hadn't reported the fraudulent hospital bill, Jennifer would have staged these fake deaths within 6 months of Hunter's birth. Mason would have grieved for his supposedly deceased wife and child while Jennifer lived somewhere else with Logan and Hunter, collecting insurance money and preparing my grandson to become part of their criminal operation when he grew up. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict Jennifer Webb on all charges. Judge Williams sentenced her to 20 years in federal prison. As we left the courthouse, Mason carrying Hunter against his chest, I realized that Jennifer's plan had backfired completely. She'd tried to destroy our family, but her crimes had actually brought Mason and me closer together than we'd been in years. "Dad," Mason said as we walked to the car, "I don't know how to thank you." "For what?" "For refusing to let her get away with it. If you'd just paid that hospital bill and stayed quiet, Hunter and I would probably be dead by now while she collected insurance money." Looking at my grandson, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, completely unaware that his mother had planned to kidnap him and raise him to be a criminal, I realized something important. Jennifer Webb had been wrong about one thing. She'd thought she could exploit my love for my family as a weakness. Instead, it had been our strength. That love had made me drive 15 hours to see my grandson. That same love had made me fight back when she tried to humiliate and defraud us. And that love had ultimately saved Hunter from a life of crime and possibly saved Mason's life as well. Some people think family love makes you vulnerable. After what we went through, I know better. Family love makes you dangerous to anyone who tries to hurt the people you care about most. And if another predator ever targets my family, they'll learn the same lesson Jennifer Webb learned. Some grandfathers are too smart, too stubborn, and too loving to be easy victims.